Welcome back to the Digital Imaging channel. I'm Will, and today I'm going to be going over your guide to paper scanning. First off, we're going to start with what is paper scanning, and that's taking your hard copy records, scanning and converting them into an electronic format. Very simple, just taking hard copy, analog, and making them digital. Now we're going to go over the different sizes of paper because there are different sizes when it comes to paper scanning. Primarily, we are talking about office-size records. So you can imagine just like a printout of an invoice or a resume or criminal records or something like that. They're on standard 8.5 by 11 office-sized pages, and that is actually what we're going to be focusing on most today. That's what we're really discussing. We're not going to be going into too much detail about things like large format scanning or book scanning, although I'm about to touch on them. We are focusing on the office-sized document conversion. And the difference between the office-sized paper records and the other types of paper that can be scanned are the types of scanners that are used. And in most cases for these office-sized documents, we are using high-speed scanners. Now, the other types of records are large format documents. You can imagine things like newspapers or engineering drawings, blueprints, things like that. And those types of records require different methods of scanning. For documents like engineering drawings and blueprints, we're going to use the large format rotary scanner. So it's much wider than the high-speed scanner for the office-sized records, but it is still a rotary scanner. So you're putting the paper in, it's feeding it through automatically. It's a much wider and a little bit slower scanner because it is meant for those large documents. Now, you might also need to use overhead scanners. So that means you literally have a camera that's looking down. It's overhead, also called planetary, that sometimes has to be used for these types of documents, especially newspapers. Because of the way newspapers are formatted and laid out, you're not going to be sending those through the rotary scanners. You're going to be capturing those using the overhead camera. Books are another type of record format that is considered paper scanning, and these will also be typically scanned using the overhead camera because of the binders and the gutters. So if you're keeping that book shape, that book formatting, you're going to use that overhead camera. Now, if we are allowed to disbind or cut the book, so basically removing that binding, they can go through high-speed scanners, but that depends on the project and our client. So if a client wants that book format they don't want to cut, we'll use the overhead. If they can be cut, we can generally use high-speed scanners after it's cut. And then lastly, we have these small format documents. And although we still consider office-sized documents kind of small format, these are the really small format, things like index cards or checks. So those can also go through the high-speed scanners, but it is a different format. Now, when you move forward with a scanning project and you're contacting a company like us, one of the first things we're going to ask you is, well, how many records do you have? And we don't expect you to know to the page or to the document how many you have, but a general idea is great so we can give you a general price and a general scope. And the easiest way for us to give you that high-level pricing and high-level idea of what the project may be is using a banker's box. So if you have your records already in banker's boxes, that's fantastic. That's our favorite unit of measurement for paper. And typically you're having roughly 2,200 to 2,500 pages per standard banker's box if they're packed fairly normally, not shoved in there completely and just smashed in. And that's just a very easy way for us to understand the scope of the project. If you said, I have roughly 150 banker's boxes, we know exactly what we're thinking. If you say you have 20, same thing. 3,000, we have an idea. If you don't have your records already in banker's boxes, but maybe in cabinets or drawers, that's still okay. We can get an idea of the size of the project based on that. All you need to do is tell us, well, I have 12 cabinets. They have 4 drawers each, and each drawer is roughly 3 feet wide. If you give us the dimensions of the cabinets and the drawers, we can figure out a general idea of how many records you have, and we'll probably turn it into banker's boxes. If your records are on shelves, just open shelving, that's fine too. What we would just ask is getting those dimensions. If you have 15 shelves with 4 rows each and they're 20 feet across, just let us know because we can turn that 20 feet into a project scope. So just knowing the dimensions allows us to create that estimate for you and help you get an idea of what you're going to be looking at. Now, if you're curious to do this yourself, in general, you're looking at about 150 pages per inch, just kind of standard packing. It really depends on how many folders there are, separators, binders, how squished together they are, and you're really slamming papers in. But in general, 150 pages per inch, which you can extrapolate to feet and so on and so on. So if you want to get that estimate yourself and just give us a buzz and say, hey, based on my estimates and using this math information, I have roughly 50 boxes. And that's a very easy way to come up with an estimate. Scanning costs is, of course, something you're going to want to know very quickly because if you have an idea your project's going to be, for instance, $10,000, but then a potential scanning company comes back and says, no, you're looking at $40,000, there's nowhere else to go. You're thinking, oh, I'm completely off the mark here. I don't know, I thought it would be much less. And that can kind of skew your project going forward. So we do want you to have an idea of what it could cost. And in general, a banker's box of records, normally organized, not smashed full of paper, not overflowing, you're looking at about 150 to 225 a box. Again, very high level, depends on how many you have, what types of records they are. Now, many factors will go into this. That's just a broad stroke estimate. Key items that'll adjust that price or confirm it will be the quantity. We just talked about estimating how many records you have. The more you have, typically the lower the unit price. That's not always the case, and having that large quantity allows us to use our resources and scale the project and make it more efficient. Type is also a very important piece of this pricing puzzle, because the type of content, the data that's actually on the records, determines how we, at least BMI, how we run our projects. So if you have something like minutes to a clerk's office, if you work in a clerk's office and these are just minutes, resolutions, things like that, that's public information. So that's handled a different way than if you work at a court and you have criminal files. Very different methods of handling. You can imagine healthcare data has to be handled a certain way. So if you have that higher level security content on your records, the price will go up a little because it has to be handled in a distinct way compared to just public information. The file organization and condition are also components. So condition means good, fair, or poor. Good condition materials means they're clean, they're not ripped apart, coffee, melting the pages, anything like that. That's just standard quality paper that's good, easy to handle. Fair means it's still okay, it's not perfect, but it's not causing a major issue. It's just occasionally some documents will be maybe ratty, onion skin, or maybe a little falling apart that be repaired a little extra, but overall, not a bad condition of the material. Poor is we are spending way more time than we would expect on a standard project by handling records that are just falling apart or they're stuck together, or a lot of different issues with the pages that is requiring more effort than is typically required. That can affect your project price because of how much more time has to be spent on these poor quality records. Now, the organization is also important, because if you can imagine if you have a box of records and it's just loose leaf pages, no staples, bindings, no folders, anything like that, good quality material, that's easy to what we call prep or prepare the pages for scanning. So just clean pages, loose leaf, much less prep than if you have your files organized in a lot of different folders, a lot of staples or binders or clips or things of that sort. So having 2,500 pages just loose leaf, that's easily prepped and fed into scanners, compared to a lot of folders. Let's say 10 pages a folder, 2,500 divided by 10, that's 250 folders that have to be handled individually. So all those touch points, and let's say every other page has a staple, so every 2 pages are stapled together. That's a lot of touch points, a lot of prep that goes into a single box, compared to that very simply organized, just 2,500 pages that are part of a box level project. It's a very different scenario. So the more complex the organization, the more pieces and touches of handling, that's gonna be something that affects your price. Next to quantity and how many records you have, the indexing, or how you're gonna digitally name your files and organize them once they're scanned, is probably the next most important piece to the pricing scheme. And that's because the more complex your indexing becomes, the more expensive it gets. So you can imagine, let's say again, we have that box. If you said, all I need is you to scan this box and make that a single PDF and name it by whatever's on the box label, box level indexing, very simple. That's one index point for that 2,500 pages. Now, let's say you have a different box and it has those 250 folders, a folder every 10 pages, and you said, I want every folder indexed. Sure, no problem, we can do that. We'll just capture what's on that folder label, but that's 250 index points for that same box. One for box level, 250 for folders. Much different scenario, a lot more effort has to go into that folder level indexing. Now imagine you said, I want every page indexed. That theoretically is 2,500 index points that have to be found, looked for, identified, and then converted into a file name. So the more detailed you go, you may get what you're looking for, but expect that price to increase as you get more granular. And 2 other pieces that tie into pricing are the schedule, which means how fast you need it done and our capacity and what we can handle at the time. That's important because if you say you want 1,000 boxes done in, let's say, 4 months, that's much more quickly than we may have anticipated on a standard schedule, which could be something like 7 to 9 months. And it depends also on our capacity. We may have other commitments. So to adjust projects and adjust priorities, there may be a higher price for that. Next, we're gonna go into the scanning process, and this is gonna be a higher level run through. I'm not gonna go into too much detail on every point, but if you work with us, this is gonna be the process that we base your project on. You're gonna get a unique process flow for your project, but this is the baseline of how we run our paper scanning projects. So first, of course, we have to get your records. They have to get to us somehow. Either we pick them up or you send them. And then once we receive them, we're going to tag them with barcodes with various pieces of information that tie it to you and your project, and that's gonna be tracked within our material tracking system, or what we call MTS, in our Unity application. Unity is a homegrown system that basically runs everything within the company related to projects. So we're tracking your records as soon as we receive them throughout the rest of the project. Now, when we do receive them, we notify the salesperson that was working with you, and they're going to create your job order, which is basically taking the contract language and the scope of work and turning that into something for our production team so that they can use that information and create that process flow. This is also done through our Unity system. So even the sales team is using that to communicate with the production team. Once that handoff is made from sales to production and that process flow has been created and the project is ready to go, we are gonna get into prep. Now, prep, as I mentioned before, is short for preparation, and that is doing everything we need to get your records ready to go through a scanner. That can include flipping through the pages to make sure there's nothing stuck between them or tears or things of that sort. We're removing staples, removing paper clips, removing pages from binders, removing pages from sections within folders, like those little ACO fasteners that you put the pages on with the holes in them. Everything related to prep is getting it ready to go through a scanner, because to go through our high-speed scanners, they can't have any of these things attached to them or be stuck together. So prep is one of the most time-consuming and laborious processes within the paper scanning process. And we like to joke that paper scanning projects aren't really about paper scanning, it's all about the prep. So oddly enough, prep, not scanning, is gonna be one of the largest chunks of your project. Then, once everything is prepped, we move into the scanning phase, so actually running these pages through the scanner. Because they are prepped, it's nice clean paper, we put them on in bulk batches and they run through the scanner while our operators watch a monitor to make sure the pages are captured properly and cleanly. Now, there is a part called back prep or back preparation, which some clients want, and that basically means if we received a document, let's say with a staple and then within a folder, some clients want those restapled and put back in folders and then put back in the boxes. If you do want back prep, that is an additional cost, because to get those files replicated to how they were when we receive them is much more difficult than just putting those pages, let's say, back in the folder in the box. So if you want back prep to match how we receive the documents, it's an additional step and it will increase the price. After scanning, those images will also go through post-scan image processing, which can include things like OCR text search. We can apply that. There may be issues with the rotating of images or things that are flipped or upside down, if maybe there are backsides that need to be adjusted, things of that sort. That all goes into the post-scan image processing. Then there's the indexing, which we talked about a bit before. So once we have those images scanned, we need to actually name them, so when we deliver them to you, you can access them and you know what you're accessing based on those file names. So we're gonna index in this phase and then create those final deliverables to then return to you and complete the project. Now, some of our clients do ask us about paper disposal. That is something we can include in the project. Not all clients want that. Some want their records returned, some want them disposed. So if you do want disposal, you just gotta let us know and we can tie that into your project so it's part of the entire process. And then the last piece of this is getting your digital delivery and viewing and accessing the images. And there are, in at least how we see it, two major methods of getting those deliveries. And first is the traditional method, as we call it, which is basically PDFs, TIFFs, JPEGs, what you imagine when you think of a digital file. So if you're receiving that traditional method, we scan the records, do all the processing, and then deliver them to you as maybe multi-page, bitonal, or black and white PDFs, or maybe you want TIFFs or JPEGs. Typically, folks want these because they don't have a system they're loading into. They're just keeping them, let's say, on a network drive, or they have an application that they are utilizing for their document management system, and they need records in a certain format to get into that file system. So that's the first method. The second method is receiving your files and using them in our digital reel application, which is a web-based, secure, hosted app that we would, as we're doing the project, load the files directly into there where you can log in and access us from. The difference with digital reel and traditional is it's the web-based platform. and you can go in there and have your entire data set available with global text search. You get the OCR, you can search all the files immediately. And then you also have image optimization, which allows you to adjust images with contrast and brightness, which is especially important if you have poor quality images, so you can optimize them before you export them or provide them to someone making a request, for instance. That wraps it up. That is your guide to paper scanning. Thank you for watching. I'm Will. This is the Digital Imaging channel. If you want to get more videos like this, make sure you sign up, and we will see you next time.